Well, thank you so much, and welcome to everyone, and welcome to our session on Introduction to SAP Business Application Studio. This is one of our main and primary tools for developers to do some of their development work, and so we'll spend the next several hours here just looking at some of the features of the tool, going through a quintessential sort of set of tasks with creating some Fiori applications and also adding those Fiori applications to transports, to checking in our Fiori applications to GitHub, simulating some developers, making changes to the application, dealing with conflicts with those changes, et cetera, et cetera. So our real goal here today is just simply to take the tool through its paces a little bit, almost like a test drive for an automobile, just to see what it can actually do. So with that, we will go ahead and get started here. And so the first thing we see, there are going to be a few little slides here that we'll go over just to give everybody a little bit of information about the tool and also to bring everybody up to speed. I know some of you may have had some exposure and opportunity to play with the tool a little bit. Others of you, this may be your first time actually seeing the tool. So either way, as you can see here, the Business Application Studio, of course, is the name of the tool itself, and it runs on our SAP Cloud Platform, also sometimes known as our Business Technology Platform, and it is multi-cloud. The multi-cloud just means that in terms of its technical distribution, that you will provision yourself a tenant, and that will be provisioned through one of the hyperscalers. That could be Amazon, that could be Microsoft with their Azure platform, that could be Google with Google Cloud Platform. At the time that you as a developer provision your developer tenant, you'll make that choice as to which one of the hyperscalers that you would like to use. The environment in which the tool is made available to you is known as the Cloud Foundry environment, which is an open source consortium that SAP is a founding and platinum member of, along with some other companies. General availability, as it says there, on Azure, Amazon Web Services, and AliCloud. A modern development environment, as you see there, tailored for efficient development of business applications. So this is a professional developer tool meant for professional developers. We have other tools that fit within the low-code or no-code space. However, this particular tool, though, is designed more for developers who need complete and total power, flexibility, and control over what they're developing. And as it says, efficient development of business applications for intelligent enterprise scenarios. So the primary focus of this particular tool is application development, and intelligent enterprise scenarios generally deals with extensions and integrations that are necessary for developers to create. So the motivation behind this particular tool, it's a successor to an earlier tool that we created many years ago, known as the SAP Web IDE. And basically, this particular tool relative to the Web IDE is a little bit more up to date in sort of taking advantage of some of the latest technological trends, particularly with containers and workspaces and those sorts of things. So taking a look at the specific motivational features here, one of the ones that you see there on the left is the developer experience. It's very important here at SAP. There are millions and millions of SAP developers all over the world working for their various organizations and companies, and a lot is asked of them in terms of building integrations and building extensions and building applications and so forth. And so here at SAP, we certainly take our developer tools very seriously. We want to make sure that we give developers the latest, the greatest, the most up-to-date tools with the most features and functions to facilitate the execution of what they need to do on behalf of their organizations. And so insofar as developer experience is concerned, you see there that it addresses full stack and cloud developer needs. So that means all parts of the stack, from the data modeling development to the service layer to the UI layer, et cetera, and extending SAP solutions and with a command line and desktop-like experience. As you will see as we go through some of the paces of the tools here, there'll be some visual things that we'll do, but then there'll also be some command line things that we will also do. Consistent experience, providing a consistent experience with leading IDEs. There are other IDEs on the market, as Visual Studio Code, as well as a plethora of other different types of IDEs that are certainly on the market. And I'm sure all of you have had the occasion to use different types of IDEs. We didn't necessarily reinvent the wheel here in the sense that with this particular tool, it is designed so that the IDE experience is consistent with what other tools are on the market that reduces the learning curve for a new developer. That means that you're able to get up and running and productive with the tool as quickly as possible. Standard code editors, Git repository integration, etc. And then, as mentioned before, multi-cloud. So it's aligned with our multi-cloud strategy, which effectively says that our general environment for which our cloud services for our platform as a service product is basically Cloud Foundry. And of course, Business Application Studio is available through Cloud Foundry, as mentioned, Amazon and Azure, Alibaba. Value proposition. So first, a turnkey solution. Once you provision Business Application Studio, then it's pretty much ready to go. You build your development space, and then you can start doing your actual development. So as it says there, instantly spin up very quickly, prepackaged environments with tools and runtimes preloaded, ready to go, tailored for developing specific types of SAP business application. Under simplified development, a seamless end-to-end development environment with a desktop-like experience. For integration of SAP solutions, build smarter, more intelligent applications integrating SAP services, technologies, and solutions. So all of the various SAP products, from SuccessFactors to S4 to ERP to Ariba to what have you, we have a very large library of APIs available that you can use to very easily extend and integrate those solutions. And last but certainly not least, in terms of productivity. So accelerate your application development using wizards. As you will see, there are several wizards that you can use that will build your basic shells of application very quickly. Optimize code and graphical editors, a complete test, run, and debug type of environment built into the tool. Again, very important for developers to be able to do a local test, a local build, and a local debug. CLI access built directly into the tool. Very easy to use deployment features, particularly the ABAP transports for those customers for which that's very important. As it says at the bottom, Business Application Studio is built on open source and leading industry standards. Okay, use cases here. So build web apps with SAP Fiori and SAP UI5, which will be the primary goal of the demonstration that we will do today. Extending SAP solutions, very important to our customer base. Creating serverless extensions. At the bottom left-hand corner, digital process automation. It's been a lot of SAP Cloud Platform workflow management, and I think, as I mentioned right before our untimely little disconnect, that's been in the news a lot lately, just in terms of developer news and topics and so forth. As companies are embarking on their digitization projects now, they're finding that their workflows are bringing together different systems, SAP systems, non-SAP systems, and so our workflow management tool, or I should say our workflow management service, is complemented by a workflow management development space template that the Business Application Studio has, so you can build those workflows very quickly and very easily. Mobilization. So native app development, if you build an app that needs to take advantage of the phone camera or maybe the accelerometer on the phone or what have you, then those types of apps can be built very quickly and deployed very easily with the Business Application Studio. And then also there is an app server built into the HANA database, as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner. And so you can build applications to run within that application server within the HANA database, which we call a HANA native type of application. Okay, so the big picture here. So from a developer perspective, the first thing that you'll see at the top is that there is going to be browser-based access. And so you'll see the developer at the top, and then you'll see they will access the Business Application Studio. And then from that point forward, they will then build what are known as dev spaces, or I should say they will spin up, to use the terminology that we like to use here, dev spaces. The dev space is just that. It's a space for you to do your development. And the development space is based on a template. You'll see looking there on the slide that one of the templates could be the Fiori template. A different template could be the EBA template, Cloud Business Application. There's also a workflow template and several more. The difference with the templates is that there's certain tools that are pre-configured in that template to do a specific type of development. So doing workflow development, for example, will be a slightly different tool set than, say, doing Fiori development. So the dev spaces are the primary environment by which you do your development. However, the dev space itself is just basically a container in which everything is prepackaged and pre-installed. And so from there, we'll use this as a segue to actually go and look at what a dev space would look like. So over here, we have our SAP Cloud Platform trial. So there are several types of landscapes that can be provisioned. So to try out the SAP Business Application Studio for 1 year as a developer, you are granted access to what's known as a trial account, or you may also hear it referred to as a trial tenant. So in that specific account or tenant, you're then able to try out some of the different services with the Business Application Studio being one of them. So to set up a trial account or a trial tenant, all you need is an email address and also a phone number for a text message for which you have to validate. So once your trial tenant or your trial account has been established, you'll see this screen. There is a direct way to get to the Business Application Studio. However, we're going to actually go into the trial account initially first by clicking on that link and by clicking on OK, since my session has expired. It expires after about 10, 15 minutes or so, but it's very easy to get it back just by doing a quick refresh. And as I mentioned a few moments ago, you can use the trial account for 365 days, basically a year, extending it every 30 days. Okay, so every 30 days, you will just get a little pop-up that just basically says you need to extend. So by clicking on the extend button, it'll extend in a few minutes. Nothing will be deleted. All your work will still be there. Okay. And then inside of the trial account here, or I should say inside of the cockpit here, then you will see what's known as a sub-account, your basic tenant. You'll notice that my provider is Amazon Web Services, consistent with SAP's multi-cloud strategy. The region in which, meaning the data center in which the account has been created, is in Frankfurt, Europe. And of course, the environment is multi-environment. If I click on my sub-account, that will then take me into a screen where I can then see various aspects related to the tenant administration and so forth. And what we really want to zoom in on here is where Business Application Studio fits into things. And so you'll notice over in the left-hand corner here, you'll see a menu and you'll see overview, services, subscriptions, Cloud Foundry, connectivity, security, entitlements, and usage analytics. And what we're going to zoom in on is services, and then you'll see here Service Marketplace. By clicking on Service Marketplace, then it brings up a series of services. And again, one of them, or I should say the one that we're interested in, is the Business Application Studio, which is right here. If we then veer over to the left again and click where it says Instances and Subscriptions, you will then notice that down at the bottom, there are two subscriptions, one to the Business Application Studio, the one that we're interested in, and you'll see the plan trial. So the trial plan basically just means you are permitted to establish two and only two development spaces, of which only one at a time can be running. So it's very easy to turn one off and turn the other on, as you'll see in a few minutes, but just to be aware of what that means when we see that trial plan that is there. And if we click on the ellipses over there on the right-hand side, you'll notice where it says Manage Roles. And if I click on that, notice it'll bring up the various roles here. So we have Business Application Studio Administrator, Business Application Studio Developer, and then a few others. If I then go under Security and I go to my users, the user that you use, of course, to set up your trial account is the user that you will see here. And for that particular user, if I go ahead and drill down on that user, you will see that in terms of role collections, Business Application Studio Developer. That's a bit of a prerequisite before you go into Business Application Studio for the first time, is just simply to make sure that the user that you are using has the Business Application Studio Developer role assigned. And if that's not the case, if you click on the little ellipses that you see in the bottom right-hand screen, you'll see Assign Role Collection right there. The Business Application Studio roles are preset in the tenant, so it's just merely a matter of just choosing that role, assigning it to your user, and then away you go. Now, coming back to our instances and subscriptions on the left-hand side and looking at our Business Application Studio, by clicking on these ellipses, I can now go to Application. Acknowledge the agreement, and here we go. So Business Application Studio. So this is the location now. As I mentioned, with a trial account, you are permitted to create 2 dev spaces. So click on Create Dev Space, and then you'll see the templates for which the dev space is created off of. So the first one you see is Fiori, the one that we will use, but then you'll also see Cloud Business Application, HANA Native Application, a mobile application, Basic. For each one of these dev space templates, then you'll see the specific extensions that will be part of it. So for Fiori, Adaptation Project, Basic Tools, Chromium Browser Tools, Freestyle Tools, HTML Runner, Landscape Module, and then there's some additional extensions that you could add at your discretion. So we'll give the dev space a name. So we'll call it Learning Room BTP1. And we'll then come here and create dev space. And as you can see, dev spaces. There are some special rules for a trial account. Notice it says there, create and manage your development environment according to the type of applications you want to develop. You can add extensions and tools to further enhance your development options. And note the note at the bottom, please note that you're using the trial version, as I've mentioned. As a result, if your development environment has not been running for 30 days, then the development space will be deleted. So as long as you start it every 30 days, then that will not be the case. As mentioned, you're allowed to have 2, and at any point in time, only 1 can actually be running. So the dev space has a status that will automatically refresh. It is currently starting. And this particular dev space, of course, was created on February the 26th. And the ID of the dev space, which is unique. Our management buttons we'll see over the right-hand side. I can stop it, download, delete, or edit, which we will actually, as soon as this dev space starts, we will actually take a look at that. Okay, so the amount of time it creates to create a development space can vary. So sometimes they create a little bit quickly, other times it may take a little bit longer. While the dev space is spinning up here, come back over here, and we have our slide here, the next slide, Business Application Studio versus SAP Web IDE. I know that many of you, for several years now, have been using the Web IDE to do your Fiori development, and of course, we are now asking you as developers to make a little bit of a change now, to start that transition and that shift from the SAP Web IDE full stack to Business Application Studio. And so it is nice to kind of look a little bit at the differences. The goal is the same, which is to be able to create the applications that we need to create. But the technical specifics of the tools are a little bit different. As you see, looking at the first bullet point there, the Web IDE full stack was available on SAP Cloud Platform, and specifically our Neo environment, which was the original environment for SAP Cloud Platform created in 2012. However, we have shifted as far as the Business Application Studio is concerned, and the delivery model for it is based on the Cloud Foundry environment, consistent with our multi-cloud approach through Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Alibaba. So as it says there, SAP Cloud Platform, Cloud Foundry environment. Now, in terms of the deployment targets, okay, that really does not change for the most part. So you can certainly deploy Cloud Foundry. You can certainly deploy on-premise ABAP, which is what we will be concentrating on here today. And also the last one there is now an ABAP environment available through SAP Cloud Platform as well as on-prem. And so that could be a potential deploy target also. Come back here, check to see, is our workspace still starting? Yep, it is still starting, so we'll still keep going. And then the solution here. So for Web IDE Full Stack, a generic workspace that contains many tools. Some tools are not necessarily required for the target business scenario. As insofar as Business Application Studio is concerned, it takes a slightly different approach in that it instantly spins up prepackaged isolated environments with everything pre-configured in that environment based on the template. So in other words, a little bit more of a targeted approach in terms of the type of tools that are available. So as opposed to an all or nothing approach with the Web ID Full Stack, you as a developer, you get to have a little bit more choice into what your dev space is and then what specific tools that you want in that particular development space. You may recall when I was creating the dev space a few moments ago that there were some tools that were pre-configured as part, but then there were optional tools that were there. Okay, so more control over the environment and code configure and sharing of dev spaces. All right, and let's see here. Yep, it is still starting. It's taking a little bit longer than it normally does, but we'll be patient while it finishes up. So Web ID Full Stack, a proprietary experience and a browser-based experience. With Business Application Studio, we go a little bit more with a VS Code sort of experience, sort of approach. It's a very popular environment with a lot of developers. And so we decided to work with that type of a UI focus. So in other words, it looks and acts and walks and quacks for the most part, very similar to the VS Code experience. And it provides the ability to add custom extensions and desktop-like experience in the cloud. So even though you're using a browser to access the tool, it's as if you have a local tool installed on your local machine. So local test, run and debug, terminal, command line access, superior code editors, etc. For the Web IDE Full Stack, cloud and full stack developers, web mobile developers, similar experience for all personas. Whereas with Business Application Studio, better support for pro code, cloud, and full stack developers, Java, Node.js, Fiori, etc. And then finally, for the full stack, open sources, uses open sources, but the majority is proprietary. SAP proprietary framework with a limited number of extensions. With Business Application Studio, relatively speaking, of course, a little bit more open source, leading industry standards, and provides the possibility to quickly integrate capabilities and technologies that exist in the market through plugins, extensions, and whatnot. All right, and it looks like there we go. It looks like our dev space is now running, although it seems to be alternating back and forth between running and starting. So let me see if I can click on that now and actually load it up. While it's loading up, if you wanted to add extensions after the fact, you can actually stop the workspace. There was a stop button that was over on the right-hand side. And then the very last button would permit you to add in additional extensions. Let's say you change your mind after the fact. It could be at any time after you create the development space. You can add in an additional extension. You have to stop it first. And then once you restart it, the additional extension would be added. You cannot remove an extension, though, after you have added. So you are permitted to add new extensions to the development space, but you cannot remove them once they're added. And here we go. Here is our workspace here. couple of things that we will see here. So the first thing you'll see is Business Application Studio, web-based development environment for SAP Business Apps. And then we see sort of some shortcuts to do a couple of different things that you may actually want to do. So clone from a Git repository, import files and folders, start from template. So let's spend a few minutes here talking a little bit about workspace management, or I should say dev space management, because while the dev space clearly is the way that you interact with the Business Application Studio to create your projects, ultimately the projects are what are actually being created. So I'm going to come over here on the right-hand side where it says Start from Template to create a new project. That is also available by, or is available, I should say, by clicking on that. And then I'm going to create a real quick project. Now, this will be just a quick down and dirty project. In other words, there won't be any specific features that are added to the project because our focus here is to look a little bit more at dev space management as opposed to project development. So in this case, that would be Fiori application. All right. And the application type is just going to be Fiori Freestyle and just a plain SAP UI5 application. Hit next. And so far as the data source is concerned, I'll just say none. Again, the purpose for this particular project is less about creating any specific type of project, more just creating a project. So we can look at dev space management. So no data source will be fine. The view name will be view 1. And the module name will just be a sample project. We'll leave all other defaults as is, and then finish. And that's it. So we just wanted a project as quick as possible. So now we'll, to actually look at the project, you'll see over on the right-hand side, Open Workspace. And as I mentioned, behind the scenes, there's just a Docker container. The Docker container is based off of Linux. And so if I click on Open Workspace, it'll bring this box up, and I can now, within that container and within my file structure, I can open it up at different levels. So at the top is Home. Underneath that is User. Underneath that is Projects. And then underneath that is each individual project. So you can generally look at your container at different levels depending on what makes sense for what it is that you're trying to do. So if I go under User, you'll notice there's projects right there. And then there's the sample project that I just created a few moments ago. So I'll click on User, click on Open. It will refresh. You'll notice on the left-hand side that the structure will change, representing that I'm looking at my dev space at a slightly different level. And there we go. So now what I can do is I can take my project, which is right here. So if I right-click on this, and then you'll see Download right there. And I'm now downloading the actual project. The project is what actually matters. Dev spaces, at least in theory, can come and go. They can be deleted sometimes. They may get, for whatever reason, corrupted in a way that you decide, you know what, maybe we need to go ahead and delete the dev space. The project itself can always be added to a Git repository. And in addition, it can just be downloaded. It just becomes a tar file when you do that, as you can see right there. So that way now, that means that I can always reestablish a new dev space and re-upload the project in that workspace. So what I will do real quick is I will move that bar real quick. There you go. Get you out of the way. So I'll close out. Go back into the Business Application Studio. Click on OK. There we go. Create another dev space. There we go. And create that dev space. And there we go. Now, that will take, may take a few minutes to start. And so once I have that started, then what I'll do is I'll then go and upload that inside of that dev space, just so you can see how easy it is just to restore my project code within a particular dev space. All right. So while that is starting, so now we'll take a look at going a little bit deeper now into actually doing some Fiori development. It's one of the main things that developers do sort of in the SAP ecosystem is that they build Fiori applications. And so what we'll do is we'll build a Fiori application that basically is based off of an on-prem S/4HANA system that we have access to and that is available to us. But now we'll build another project, but this particular project now will be a little bit more, as they say, real world. Now, the first thing we want to do is we want to double check our prerequisites, since we are going to be connecting to an on-prem system so that we can actually use an OData endpoint that will supply data to our Fiori application. Two little prerequisite steps that we need to do. First of all, the on-prem system itself is available. It's already preloaded here. I've logged on, and you'll see that the system ID for the on-prem system is S4D. And again, this particular system has a number of OData endpoints that are going to be used for our Fiori application. And so you'll see SAP Gateway, and then you'll see here under Runtime, Activate and Maintain Services. So let's take just a quick sneak peek at the OData endpoint that we're going to be using. You double click on Activate and Maintain Services. That will take a second to load up. And the one that we're going to use is down here at the bottom, a bit more towards the bottom. There we go. And then you'll see UX_travel_SRV. Nothing special about this OData endpoint other than the fact that it's just a sample. It just makes some data available that we can use as our data source for an OData application. I'll double click on it real quick, confirm that the URL is active, and then go to the Gateway client, where based upon this OData endpoint, if I look at the entity sets, meaning the data that it makes available, I'll see that it looks like, or what it makes available, this is based off of the ABAP flight data model that we've been using for many, many decades now. And so that would be carrier information, connection information, flight information, booking information. For those of you that had the opportunity to do some ABAP development in your career, which would most likely be virtually 100% of you, I'm sure, then this, again, is based off of the very popular and well-known and well-established flight data model. So perfect. Looks like we've got some data that we can, as we say, play around with here. So now, the first thing that we need to do is we need to create an SSL tunnel connection because my development environment is in the cloud. This is a cloud tenant that exists. And so it is located in one location. And then the on-prem environment is located here in a different location. I need to connect the two together. There's always a security risk when you're connecting two disparate systems together. So we want to make sure that the data is not going to be hijacked in transit. Or if it is hijacked, well, then we're going to make sure it's encrypted so that if someone gets that data, that it'll just be gibberish to them. So to do that, we're going to use the cloud connector, which is a reverse proxy to establish what we call an SSL tunnel. So in other words, a connection in which all data that goes through that tunnel or that connection is encrypted from point A to point B. So the cloud connector is right here. Now I'll do a refresh. I may have timed out. And I can log in again. There you go. And you'll notice it says there that Cloud Connector is not configured and remains inoperative unless you provide the following settings, which no problem, we'll provide right now. So the first thing it needs to know is the region. So coming back to our account and going up to home for our account, you'll see that the region here is Europe, Frankfurt, and that's going to be Amazon Web Services. So in the Cloud Connector, we will choose that option, be down towards the bottom. And you'll see right there, Europe, Frankfurt, AWS, Amazon Web Services. Notice the DNS, CF EU10 HANA.ondemand.com. So we'll choose that first. Next thing it needs is the unique sub-account ID. The sub-account ID, if you're at this screen in your cockpit for your tenant, if you look at the button in the middle here, this gives you more information about your specific sub-account or your tenant. By clicking on that, you will see the unique ID right there, which luckily we can copy. Control C, and then paste that where it's set for sub-account. The display name is freely available. You can use whatever you want. So let's say that this tenant is a sandbox tenant, then I may want to type in sandbox. Let's say we're using it for development, then I may want to type in development or dev or something of that nature. So it's freely nameable by you. It is not anything that is validated against any repository. What I like to do, and this is just simply me, in other words, and I'm not saying that that's a best practice in any way, but I just like to go ahead and use the subdomain, which is also unique, but is a shorter ID. So I can paste that in here, and then maybe put a little something at the end if I wanted to. For example, I could say dev or something like that. Okay, or not if I just want that ID. And then you must log into your account, or you must provide a username and a password, and the username and the password must be a tenant administrator. In other words, it double checks the user ID to make sure that this user ID that you provide is authorized to establish SSL tunnels. For trial accounts, the default user, there's only one user in a trial account, and that user is automatically assigned the appropriate role. Therefore, I can come and put in the email address that I use to establish the account, along with password. The location ID is not needed in this case. That's if you have multiple connections going to the same tenant. Description is optional. I'll just put the display name there. And more likely than not, since this is providing connectivity to an on-prem environment, there's going to be a proxy which is already filled. Hit save. And then we'll pause for a second while it goes ahead and informs us that, yes, we are connected since February the 26th, no active resources available. The no active resources available says that while I have established now a connection between this particular reverse proxy product, Cloud Connector, and your tenant that's out here, nevertheless, you have not yet provisioned any OData endpoints that it has access to. As it says there, check cloud to on-premise access control. Cloud to on-premise access control is right over here on the left-hand side. So the one that I wanted to have access to is the one right here. So if I hit the back button, and if I go and take a look at the URL for this. So the OData endpoint is ux_travel_srv. If I call the browser, I will use Internet Explorer, which will be fine. I don't even need to log in, even though it's asking me to, because what we're really interested in is taking a look at this URL. So if we take a look at this URL that you see here, let's push you up a little bit. So nothing else gets in the way, and there we go. So basically says, if you want to use that particular OData endpoint, you are going to have to provision this basic URL. So there's the host name, there's the port number, and then of course there's the suffix of the URL. So we'll start with that. So the first thing we'll do is we'll take this particular host right here. We'll copy that. Cloud to on-premise. Mapping of a virtual to an internal system. So add, and this of course would be an ABAP system. Next, protocol will be HTTP. Next, and then the internal host, and there we go. So s4dhost.wdf.sap.corp. Next is going to be the internal port, which is 8011. So we'll take that value and then we'll put right there. So we're starting the provisioning process, and it starts off by updating the provisioning table to say, okay, here's an actual host on our landscape. Now, would you like to do a mapping? In this case, we will do a mapping. Now, the mapping can be whatever you want in terms of the mapping. As it happens, I assume that the mapping has a certain name only because I have created a destination in my tenant that puts in that mapping name. So in other words, it's freely nameable by you. But if you look at the destinations that I have here, and the destination we will use here is a destination called S4D1. I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. But for that destination, if we look at the URL here, I assume that the mapped name is S4D virtual. So based on that assumption, I'm going to copy that value over. Again, it is freely nameable by you. S4D virtual. And on the same note, the port number there is 8,000. So based on that assumption, then I'll put in 8,000 here. And there we go. Okay. And click next. Principal type is none. That means authentication. That doesn't mean that there will be no authentication. It just means that we will not hard code any authentication credentials. When used, then a username and password must be provided. Next. Next again. And then description is optional. And let's ping it, make sure that it's there, and then finish. And as it says there, reachable. So far, so good. That gets us to this part right here, albeit via mapping. Now we need this part, which is right there. Now, that is the only OData endpoint that technically I need to provision. For brevity's sake, I'll go ahead and provision based on just the root namespace. So I'll do /SAP, and then I'll say that particular path plus all subpaths, which will include this one, along with all others that are subpaths. So down at the bottom, resources, hit the plus. And again, as I said, /SAP, and then path and all subpaths. Save it, done. And there we go. So that takes care of everything on this end that is necessary, just in terms of making sure that the OData endpoint that's going to be needed for this Fiori app has been provisioned from a security governance perspective to be used by the developer and by the end user in terms of application development. Over here at the tenant level, as mentioned, the destination would then be the next thing that you create. In this particular case, I pre-created the destination, but I do want to go over it with you just so you can see exactly what it entails. It's under connectivity, which is, again, part of your tenant administration setup. You're in the cockpit, and you'll see new destination. The destination gets a name, in this case, S4D1. Type, HTTP in this case. Description, freely nameable by you. In this case, it's the system ID. And then the URL, keeping in mind the mapping that has just been set up. And so S4D virtual will map to the S4D host. Proxy type in this case is on-premise, because we're going through a reverse proxy to an on-premise system. No authentication doesn't really mean no authentication. It means that when used dynamically at runtime, authentication credentials must be provided. If not, then the authentication credentials will be asked for. And then some additional properties, okay, that are listed here. So we're going to be using this for Fiori. There's going to be a timeout of 60,000 seconds, the client 100, ABAP, web ID enabled, system ID is S4D, and then several usages that you see at the bottom that allows us to generate Fiori apps, browse data services, add to ABAP transports, things of that nature. Now, one thing that you will notice when you create this destination, there's a check connection button that you see down at the bottom. This has caused a little bit of consternation with developers, because when you click on check connection, you get this box. Failure reason, could not check at the moment, please try again later. And that may, as a developer, make you think that, oh, there's a problem, I must have done something wrong. Maybe there's a typo somewhere, let me double check what I put here, let me double check what I did in the cloud connector to make sure everything's okay. But if we look at the message a little bit more carefully, it says cannot check at the moment. Please try again later. So in other words, it's not really telling us that it can't connect. It's just saying I can't check at the moment, as if it's busy and doing something else. So because of the HTTP redirect that's happening behind the scenes, it's not actually able to really ping through the tunnel to see can it actually connect to the host. So in other words, we don't really know at this point whether or not we have a typo or everything is correct or not. We will know when we actually use it over here in terms of creating a project. So with no further ado, let's do that. So the first thing we do is we figure out at what level do we want to be to create our project. You'll notice I'm at the user level, and then there's projects, which is right there. And so I can either stay at this level, that would be fine, or I may want to go to the projects level, which I can do just by saying File and then Open Workspace, and just shift to the projects level. There we go. I can expand or not expand, it doesn't matter, and then hit Open. It will refresh. And then from that level now, I can click on File, New Project from Template. There's also a button over here on the right. Okay. And this is now our second time seeing this particular template. Now, this time we will go through as if we actually are creating a live application, because we are actually creating a live application. One of the features of the tool here is that you can maximize the tab. So you'll see Project from Template over here on the right-hand side. If I take my mouse and just put it over on the right-hand side, if I double-click, it can maximize that. If I double-click again, it will restore it. So for some individuals, some developers, certainly in my case, we want things, generally speaking, while we're working with it, to be as big as possible. So you'll see Fiori application. Notice Fiori Freestyle project has now been deprecated. A particular wizard has been deprecated, or I should say particular template. It will eventually be removed, but when deprecated for some amount of time, it will actually remain on the screen. Fiori application, we'll click on that. And hit start. And then the first thing we see there is application type, Fiori Elements, and UI5 Freestyle. And then we have a few that are here. Fiori Work List application, one of the Fiori floor plans, Master Detail application, the one we will use, and then of course a truly freestyle UI5 application. So the one that we want is Master Detail. Master Detail, you can kind of see the picture down at the bottom. There's also a link to more information, which will actually take you to the Fiori Design Guidelines website to get more information on this particular floor plan. But if you look on the left, you'll see what effectively are header records. And then if the end user clicks on one of those, over on the right, it'll bring up details about a specific record. Hit next. And the very next thing is configuring the data source and service selection. So first of all, the data source. This time now we are actually going to connect to an actual SAP system. Notice also in here, connect to an OData service. So if you had your own URL, then you could put that in. You can also use a exposed API or an exposed URL in API Business Hub, a project-specific destination if you have a file, and then you can even upload a metadata document, which is in XML format. So you have a couple of options here just in terms of, for the Fiori app itself, where is my data that I'm going to be displaying and using? So connect to SAP system. And then the list that I see right here. So there's Northwind 1, S4D1, S4D2, S4D3. That list now is going to appear here. And there we go, S4D1. And at that point, you now, remember, the authentication was none, which doesn't mean no. It just means now you must provide your authentication credentials. So we must log into the backend system, train-20, put in the password. And then you'll see right here, log in. Now we know that the connection works because we see the list that sort of appears underneath. Let's go back here for a second. See that little list for service? You get that if the connection, the login is successful. So remember, over here, hit check connection. You're going to get that every time, so ignore it. It's over here. At this point, this is where you know that, okay, everything is okay. Now, because there are so many, let's take advantage of what we call cumulative scrolling. So if I do UX, that should bring it right up. So that makes things a little bit easier. Click there. There we go. And then you'll see next at the bottom. All right. Now we're going to, based upon the rules of the floor plan, we're going to set up our master detail application. So in terms of the object collection, again, this particular OData endpoint makes 4 entity sets available. You can look at carrier records. I think there's about 26 records in that table, or connection records, or flight records, or booking records. So we'll start off on the left-hand side with carrier. Again, there's about 26 or so records available. So there'll be 26 headers that we see on the left-hand side. And for those particular records, the key of the record is the carrier ID. And we get to display a nice logical name. A lot of times we may not want to see the key, or the end user may not want to see the key. They may want to see something different. So in this case, the carrier name, which links to the key. And is there any numeric field or property that's available in the entity type? In this case, there is none. And since there's no number available, then there would not be a unit of measure applicable either. So in other words, those two go together. So if I had a price field, for example, then currency would be the unit of measure. Or if I had a distance field, for example, then the unit of measure would be miles or kilometers or what have you. However, I do get a drop down to put in another field, even though it is not actually a unit of measure field, but I'll go ahead and put it in anyway. So I'll go ahead and put in URL there. And there we go. All right, won't hurt anything. I can always take it out if I change my mind. So those fields take care of the left-hand side of the floor plan. So now on the right-hand side would be the line items. So it looks like if you choose any particular carrier, for example, American Airlines or Delta Airlines or Singapore Airways or Japan Airlines, what would you like to see for that airline? Would you like to see people who are booked on it? Would you like to see connections for that airline? Would you like to see the flights for that airline? So we'll use that navigation link to flight. And a flight is uniquely identified by its connection ID and also by the flight date. And in addition, I will bring in, since it's going to allow me to bring in some additional fields, I'll bring in seats max, and then I'll also bring in seats occupied. And there we go. Remember, the template is just creating the shell of the application. You are free to change things around if you need to. We click next. And so now we give our project a name. So we'll call this one Flight. Oops. Must be all lowercase. Flight Analysis 1. And then title will be, let's see, we'll call it Carriers or List. Carriers and Flights. And then application namespace will be Learning Hub, Learning Room, .btp. Description will be the same. And there we go. It's just sort of finishing up everything with our application. As you can see, we're at the last one now, project attributes. Click on Finish. And there we go. So now let's go ahead and restore our default screen size by double-clicking on the tab. And as it says there, that the application will open in its own workspace, and you'll see the workspace right there. So Flight Analysis 1. And underneath that, all of the files for this particular application or this particular project are listed there. Web app, UI5 YAML file, the index.html, etc. All right. And there we go. So that's that particular template to run is how we would create a nice Fiori app. So now let's give it a quick test. So you'll notice over here, there's a series of icons. So we see Explorer, we see search, we see source control, we see debug, we see extensions, we see Fiori SAP systems, Cloud Foundry targets, run configurations, and Task Explorer. And so these basically come from the view menu, and you'll see them all listed here. That way you can add in and remove different ways of looking at different things in your particular dev space based on what you need to look at. Do I need my Explorer? Do I not need it? Do I need to look at extensions? Do I not need it? Do I need plugins or output or not? So in order to do this, to do a quick test, you'll see run configurations, which is right here. However, before I actually do that, we need to change our perspective slightly because we are under projects, which is great when you need to look at your project or all of your projects from a more holistic perspective. We need to be a little bit more detailed though. So we need to come and open workspace and we need to look directly at this level. So notice I choose flight analysis. So open at that level. You see how easy it is to change the perspective of what you look at in your dev space. So most of the same extensions appear here. And then, of course, run configuration is right there. Run configuration is just that, so that we can now actually do just a quick little test of this just to make sure everything works. So we do the plus, which is right here, create configuration. And notice over on the right-hand side, a series of pop-ups will appear that we will confirm. So the first thing it says is, okay, what particular application are you actually trying to test here? This would be Flight Analysis 1. That is correct. I can either hit enter or click on it, either way. Next, which UI5 version? Do you want to tether this particular project to a UI5 version, or do you just want to use the latest version, which in this case, we will do the latest. And in terms of the destination type, do you want to skip and use the configuration from UI5 YAML file, which is a part of the project, which says to use this particular system? Or do you want to connect to an SAP system, or do you want to connect to a URL? So the YAML configuration file does actually have a system listed, so I'll go ahead and click on that. And then a name, effectively, this is like a variant. So what do you want to call this? So I want to call it Flight Analysis 1. The configuration will then be created. If I expand the configuration, you'll see the UI5 version, and then you'll see the data source. And so for the data source, I do want to take my mouse, move over to the right-hand side. You'll see where it says bind. I do want to go ahead and click on that. And that way I can change it. I can say, okay, skip, use config from UI5 YAML, or connect to an actual SAP system. That way I may want to run it against my production system or run it against my testing system. So by clicking on that, connect the SAP system, and notice it brings up that same destination list again. So I can then choose S4D1. Same thing with my UI5 version. Notice there's a little green light there. So I can come to UI5 and again bind, and then I can say use the latest. So the first time you go through, it'll ask you these questions, but these are freely changeable at any time. Okay, so then we go to flight analysis, and then you'll see a little green button over here on the right-hand side to run the module. By clicking on that, it then takes me over to my debug perspective, which is right here. Takes a couple of seconds, and then it launches the application. If I come back while that's launching, if I come back over to the application studio, you'll see it says there's server started, URL, HTTP, localhost 8080. And there we go. Brings up a sample Fiori Launchpad just to sort of give it a user experience. And then you'll see under My Home, list of carriers and flights. Click on that. And voila. So again, no authentication never really means no authentication. What it really means is, well, at the appropriate time, I will ask you to log in with a username and password. And there we go. So again, the floor plan is master detail. So that means initially we see what we call header records, sort of generically speaking. So if I take, for example, American Airlines here, if I click on that once, over on the right-hand side, you will see that detailed information, line item information, as we like to call it, for that particular header is displayed. And of course, the end user can then change to a different record. and it'll refresh, or a different record, it'll refresh, or a different record, and it will refresh. So sort of a quintessential, typical sort of master detail refreshing type of application. All right, so everything's fine there. Looks like we're good to go. So now what we'll do is we will assign this to a ABAP transport here. All right, let's get our commands ready that we're going to need to do here. One second while I grab those real quick. Okay, so there are three that we're going to need. First one is going to be npm install. Put them over here. I'm going to copy and paste them in. Next one will be npm run build. And the last one will be abap-deploy. Okay. Now, first one's going to be npm install. And it's the first time we've seen the command line interface. So let's take a look as to how we get to that. So you'll notice over here as far as the application studio is concerned, since the last thing we did was a local test, we're looking at the debug view, which is right here. So to get back to my Explorer view, that's the first view, which is right there. And then we need our command line terminal, which is going to be down here in the bottom right-hand corner. So you can take any one of these. So I'll take the web app one, which is right here, just using that as a sample folder. So right-click on that, and then you'll see Open in Terminal. Again, you can do that on theoretically any one of these. I'll do it on web app, Open in Terminal, and it opens the terminal down here in the bottom right-hand corner. Now, text is a little small there. Notice if I start typing there, may not be able to see that. So let's increase the text size of that a little bit. Settings is here in the bottom left-hand corner. These are all of your settings for Business Application Studio and for your dev space. If I click on that, you'll see preferences. Click on that, and this will bring up a screen momentarily. I can maximize this. Remember, if you double-click on any tab, it'll maximize it. And you'll notice there's a lot of different settings here. User settings, and then also workspace settings. So I'll set it up on user, and since we are looking at the command line terminal, that would be terminal, which is down here. If I click on that, then it'll just scroll down to that point. You'll notice underneath it, it says integrated. But over here on the right-hand side, I can now start to scroll down a little bit. And so if I just scroll down sort of slowly, you'll see where it says font size, and notice it's 14. So I can jump that up to, say, 16, make that a little bit bigger. Also, too, you'll see in terms of font weight, there's normal font, or I can go with bold font, if that helps you to see it a little bit easier. Okay, so you can come here at any time and make a change. There's no save. It takes effect immediately. So if I just now come and double-click to go back, meaning to restore, then this should be, at least relatively speaking, slightly bigger. All right. So now let's put in our commands. So, one other thing here. Notice I'm at the web app level, because that was the folder that I used. I actually need to be at a slightly higher level. So let me go ahead and use my change directory, CD, // and then go to now the directory level of the actual project itself, which is the name of the project, Flight Analysis 1. Then from there now, we'll be able to put in our commands. So npm install first. This will take a second to run. There's some scripts that are needed from npm that are going to be necessary to be able to assign to an ABAP transport. There we go, we're done. The next one will be, let's do the build now. Not every file is needed to be assigned to an ABAP transport, because when I'm executing the application from an ABAP system, certain things it just doesn't need. So it's going to take the files that it needs, and then it's going to leave the files behind that it doesn't need, and it's going to put them in its own folder to do so. So you'll notice there's a dist folder that was created right there. These are the files that are going to be needed insofar as assigned to an ABAP transport. So what actually gets assigned to the ABAP transport is that folder. And then finally, the ABAP deploy. And this will begin a wizard that will just ask me a series of questions. Again, it's the first time we've seen the command line interface. Let's take a look at how this comes across. So notice the first question. Specify the source folder path for deployment. So you'll have to use your keyboard for this. This is more of a command line interface, even though we're running it within an actual window. So /dist, meaning current working directory, and the dist folder, which is right here. So since that's correct, I just hit enter. Now it uses that same list over here, all of these systems, and then I choose the one that represents the system that I want to deploy to, which in this case is S4D1. So that one is there. I would use my arrow keys on my keypad if I wanted to go through that list. But since S4D1 is the one that we want to use here, then we'll hit enter. Now we need to log into that actual system. That's the username, and then this is the password. And now the actual name of the application itself. So since we're assigning to an ABAP transport, there's some special rules that come into effect. That would be the first letter has to be either a Z or a Y. And so I will come here and I will put a Y, and then FA1 will be fine. Description. The carriers with flights will be fine. And then now, again, since we are talking about ABAP, that means we now have to do a package. Package has already been pre-created in the backend system. I'll go ahead and copy that value and then just paste it in. There we go. So you'll see that. And then the transport request, which has also been pre-created in the backend system. So I'll just copy that and paste it in. And there we go. Hit enter, and that's everything it needs. And as it says there at the bottom, the application is being deployed to ABAP in create mode. It will detect, based on the unique name, if I were to run through the script again, it would deploy in update mode. So if I changed anything in the application, in any particular file, then it'll deploy in update mode and it'll just update the same application. All right, and typically this doesn't take too long. So now we're going to transition now. Once this finishes deploying, we're going to sort of move into a slightly different phase in terms of the demonstration this morning. And one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to simulate two developers now working on this particular Fiori app. So in other words, we're going to transition to GitHub, and we're going to work with Git a little bit so we can kind of see how that would actually work. First, let's confirm that everything deployed correctly. Let's come back over here, do a quick refresh. There we go. So there it is. So YFA1. And as you can see, it uses in the backend system a BSP, a business server page application. That's sort of the shell to hold the Fiori app. And so you'll see pages with flow logic. There's the index.html, and everything else goes under page fragments. Okay. Now you would transport as you typically do it. Let's come back over to the Business Application Studio. And now, as I mentioned, we're going to simulate now sort of working with GitHub a little bit. So first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come out here to GitHub. I've already pre-logged on to GitHub using my user ID. Let me do a quick little refresh here. And then I'm going to create a new repository out here. So click on New. And so there's the owner, which is going to be me. developer 20, and then the repository name will be called Flight Analysis. And Flight Analysis 1, and there we go. Okay. And then description, of course, is optional. And then notice it says public. Anyone on the internet can see this repository. I can choose who can commit. And then for private, you choose who can see and commit to this repository. So I'll keep it public. I am going to invite another developer to collaborate on it. And I'm going to go ahead and initialize the repository by adding a quick little README file and create the repository. Give that a second while it creates. And then there we go. Perfect. So now coming back to the business application, the studio here. So first thing we will do is down in the bottom right-hand corner in our command line prompt, we're going to go ahead and initialize our local repository. And we're basically going to do that by coming over here and doing using a git command here, or a couple of git commands. So the first one is I'm going to set up my username, my email address, and so forth. So we'll type in git and then config. And then the switch that I'm going to use is going to be global. I can do global or user. And this is going to be my email. So user.email. And then we'll also do the username. And if I just do a quick list here, so git config, again, my switch, -- for my different switches, and list, and then you'll see, there we go. So there's my email, and there's my name. So now, the git pane is, let's see, here's going to be there, source control, there we go. No repository found. And so I will initialize my local repository by clicking on the plus button, which is right here. You can also do this step first if you want to. So click on that, and there we go. So it basically says, okay, based upon the development work that you have done in here, here's all of the things that you have created, basically. The little U there just means that it is unstaged. Staging in Git is like staging in theater. Basically, when someone says, hey, you're up, you're next on stage, that means get ready. You're going to be the next one to go out there. And so unstaged means not on stage yet. Okay, so now we will go ahead and stage the changes. So notice there's a little menu here, and then notice stage all changes. So the little U there, which means unstaged, is going to turn into an A. That means you're up, you're staged. You are ready now to be added to a Git repository. So again, we got our email and username there. And as a matter of best practices, is generally considered to go ahead and do a message, just so that when someone looks at this, they can see, okay, who did this and when. So my message will be initial commit by developer 20. There we go. And then coming back to the menu here, more actions, and then you'll see commit with a message, so that'll be commit signed off. Before I actually click on that, because there are some other buttons here too. So you'll see right here, toggle to tree view. Some of you may prefer to see the files like this. You can also collapse the files, collapse all. So that way now, these are staged changes now. And again, I get to see all the different files in it, but you may find a more intuitive view to actually look at. All right, so if I click there, commit, signed off. And there we go. Notice at the bottom, initial commit by developer 20. That commits them to the local Git repository that is part of the dev space that has been spun up here. But what we now want to do is want to put them out here so some other developer can then collaborate. So for that, there we go. We're going to come down here to the bottom of the screen. Again, we're back in our command line prompt. Keep in mind, we already put in our email. We already put in our name. And so we're going to say git, and this is going to be remote. So in other words, a remote repository, and we're going to add now a URL. So we're going to add, and the origin URL, ORIGIN, and then we put in that actual URL. So I come over here to GitHub itself, and I should be able to get the URL just by clicking up here in the address line. It's also available in Git itself. If I click on the repository itself, and then should see the URL right there. So either one will work. So Control C, come over to the Application Studio, click, and Control D. All right. So again, add in a remote URL. Hit enter. You can always double check at any time just by saying, hey, I want to see all my configuration parameters. So git config, and my switch is list, L-I-S-T. And there we go. And you'll see the remote origin right there. All right, excellent. So now we just push the changes that we made locally out to the remote repository. So 4 words that we use here. So the first is going to be git, which means a git command. Again, we're now pushing out to a remote repository. So we use the word push. And where are we pushing it to? Well, we're pushing it to whatever URL that we've set up. And when we set up the URL, we said that the URL is under the configuration parameter origin. It's a remote origin. So we use the word origin here again also. So we add origin, we push origin. And then what branch do we want it to be called? We want it to be called master. You can have different branches in your code. All right, hit enter, and there we go. So we're now connecting to github.com, where again, there's no such thing as no authentication. So therefore, we must now provide the user name. And password. And there we go. Wait till it finishes. And so now if we come out here to GitHub, we should be able to do a quick little refresh. You'll notice there is a branch called main, but notice there are 2 branches. Notice also we see a message. Master had a recent push less than a minute ago. So if I just hit the drop down, and there's master, and there's our files. Initial commit by developer 20. Okay. So now what developer 20 is going to do is bring another developer online. This developer will then collaborate with developer 20 in terms of this particular project. And so when we go to the actual repository itself, and then we go under settings, and then we want to invite a collaborator. So you haven't invited any collaborators yet, which is under manage access, which is under settings for the repository. So we want to invite a collaborator, and then we'll put in their username, email address. And there it is, Fiori Developer 21. Add Fiori Developer 21 to this repository. And there we go. So now let's flip over to Developer 21. First thing Developer 21 is going to do is check their email. You come to email real quick, a quick little refresh, and then notice the email. Fiori Developer 20 has invited you, Developer 21, to collaborate for this particular repository. Let me double check. I pre-logged into GitHub as Developer 21 just to speed things up slightly. Do a quick refresh. Yes, I'm still logged on. And you'll see view invitation. There we go. So Fiori Developer 20 invited you to collaborate, accept invitation. And there we go. And so now if you're Developer 21, effectively you see the same thing that Developer 20 saw. So there's the master branch, which is right here. All right. So now Developer 21 wants to do a little work on this. So I'll come back over here. Let me go into, we'll take the shortcut link this time for Developer 21. You'll notice when you're on your trial page here, meaning your home screen, that you can go into the Business Application Studio real quickly. Give that a second, click on OK. Let's spin up a dev space real quick. And then there we go. All right, while we're waiting for the dev space to spin up, it's always a good time to cover another slide or two. All right, so Business Application Studio versus Visual Studio Code. We've got a few questions on this. A lot of developers use Visual Studio Code. It's a fantastic product, comes from Microsoft. We do have some extensions and plugins for Visual Studio Code. And from time to time, we've been asked why not just use Visual Studio Code, why create the Business Application Studio? And our answer is very easy, for this, in that there's some very SAP-specific things for SAP-specific type of development that our developers ask for that, in our opinion, justifies the creation of a new product. Yes, we can certainly build extensions, for Visual Studio Code. Lots of different products on the market will give you the capability to build extensions, plugins, things like that. But plugins and extensions only get you so far. It depends on what it is you're trying to do. Maybe some things can be done that way, but true optimization comes when you can build everything from scratch. And that way you can really orient and optimize it to fit the needs of the developer audience. So as it says on the left, in terms of the Application Studio, which we do recommend, modern, maintenance-free. We take care of the updates, which are generally once a month for Business Application Studio. VC Code is still an actual desktop install. It is not cloud-based, at least not at this time. Hosted environment, optimized for SAP developers. Again, that keyword is optimized. So optimized for SAP developers doing specific SAP development type work. An offline development option is planned. I have no ETA on that, but that is planned where it can be installed locally on your front end. Centrally administrated with tools, repositories, system access, and company policies, because there are roles for the Business Application Studio. The tenant administrator can, based on your user ID, actually choose who gets the developer role, who gets the administration role, etc. Integrates with existing SAP solutions, systems, and services seamlessly, I might add, which is really why that's important. And if necessary, easy access to VS Code compatible extensions from the open source the marketplace, which is the underlying environment that we use to create the Business Application Studio. So we are aware that of the other products, and one of the design goals is to integrate with those other products also. As I mentioned, we didn't reinvent the wheel. We took the current state of IDEs as developers like, and then we worked within that framework, even in creating our own product. All right, let's see how we're looking here. There we go. So everything is up and running. So let's go into dev space. So we're now developer 21. And then the first thing developer 21 is going to do, because again, the repository is right here. So it's ready to go. So we want to clone this repository. So we take the URL. Clone just basically means put this repository in my namespace. So clone from Git right there, first one that you see. And you put the repository URL right here at the top. Hit enter. Give it a second. And now I can open my workspace based upon that repository. And there it is, Flight Analysis 1. And then open. Okay, so the first thing developer 21 would probably notice is, hey, wait a minute, there's a README file, which is right here, readme.md, but when I look at this repository over here, there's a lot more stuff here than just that. That's because the branch is, the branch for which those particular files are under is master, and the one that it actually cloned, meaning the one that it actually is linked to right now, is main. That could also be confirmed by opening up a command line. So you can right click here, open in terminal. So whenever you right click on any resource that is clickable and you say open in terminal, it always opens up a terminal. You can also open up multiple terminals. You can confirm your level. So in this case, flight analysis 1, which is fine. And then you can always get your status with Git by just using your Git command and your status option. And notice it says there you are on branch main. So now what we want to do is see what the remote branches are. So Git branch, in other words, show me all branches, remote, and notice there are 3. So head, main, and then master. Really, main and master are the 2. So now, as you can imagine, we need to do some sort of a switch over here. So maybe there's a git switch command, like switch branch or something like that. But that's too wordy. So the designers of Git, thankfully, came up with something a little bit easier and something that's easy to remember, checkout. Just like checking a book out of the library. So we want to check out, which really just means we want to now connect to the other branch, which is called master. Once that is done, then we can then just say get status to confirm that. Although we can also see that just by looking over here on the left, because we see the files immediately update to show that. All right. So now I'll simulate making some sort of a change. So we'll come over here to a file. We'll do master.view, which is fine here. And if I scroll down here again, any type of a change will do. Let's see if we can figure out something that we want to do here. Let's see, title equal to carrier name, member user equal to URL. So I'll take this out. There we go. All right, again, any type of a change will do. Do a quick save. Notice you have a file, and then you have a save all. I've only changed one file, but as a matter of habit, I almost always choose save all. So save all there. Again, if I come down here and check the status. Now, one thing to notice here, and when I first started using the tool, I got, sort of got trapped into this a couple of times until you learn. Notice I have my cursor right here, which is blinking on line number 67. So we can certainly type there. You'll notice down in the command line interface, it says user flight analysis, and then there's a white box right there. What that means is that the active window or the active part of your screen is actually where the blinking cursor is. So if I actually want to type in a new command line here, then I have to actually click and turn it black. Otherwise, it would actually start typing up at the top. Now, if you're like me, that's going to catch you a couple of times, until that happens. And then you'll just sort of train yourself as a matter of habit of saying, okay, before I click in the command line part of the screen, just take my mouse, or I should say before I type in the command line part of the screen, just take my mouse and just sort of click there every time and then start typing. Again, if you're like me, that'll get you a couple of times, but then eventually you'll remember to do that. Okay, so get status. Notice it tells me, okay, you've changed one file right there, which is master.view.xml. And so now let's get ready now to check in that change. So you have to do the same thing. In other words, you have to set up your global parameters in terms of your email and your name. Of course, you're 21. And there we go. All right, so now let's go ahead now and check this in here. And what we'll do this time is, because I used the command line, the menu to do it this time, use the command line to do it this time. So if I go to master.view, right click on it, then you'll see I can copy the path. So you can take any resource, right click on it, and you can get the absolute path or the relative path. So master. Oops, open that up accidentally. There we go. So right click, copy path. Remember, click in the command line screen. Again, that'll get you a few times until you remember to do that. So of course, this is just a simple git add. and then Control V, and notice it puts it in, basically. Oh, one other thing though. My double quotes. So let me put the double quotes around that. There we go. And then we want to set and commit our message here. So that would be get and commit. So notice the difference. So if you want to use the visual way, that's going to be stage changes. Well, I guess we get in the get pane here. So you'll see stage changes. It would be unstaged until I actually had staged it, but you can always come up here and do your stage all changes. And then you can do your message here, and then you can say commit signed off. But if you prefer to use the command line, so for those of you that like using the command line, then it's just a get add, a get commit. Again, we're going to do a message. So the switch is message, and then whatever message that you want. And so this will be, let's see, removed bad code. Oops, bad code. Done by developer 21. And there we go. Okay. So again, that takes care of committing it locally. So now we do the same thing again that we did before. We need to push that out. So it doesn't yet reflect at this level. Let's come back over here, go into web app, go into view, go to master.view, notice initial commit done by developer 20. But that will change here in a moment, because we will now say get. We're going to push out based on the origin URL of the remote repository, so origin. And again, we checked out the master branch, and so we want to make sure that we certainly push those changes to the master branch. Username, password, and usually this doesn't take very long at all. So do a quick refresh, and there we go. So master.view.xml, removed bad code, done by developer 21. I would also see it here. Master had a recent push less than a minute ago. You can also do compares, because you'll see there web app removed bad code. So you can even see the change that was made and compare it to what it looked like before. All right. So now, that's developer 21. Let's go back to developer 20, who's over here. And as developers like to do, developers like to code. That's what we do. So developer 20 decides, hey, I'm going to start making some changes to this code again. So we'll go under web app and pull up master. And there we go. And there we go. All right. And so what developer 20 does, and let's say they come in here and they look at this and say, oh, you know what? The end user says that I want some nice little text on the button here. And so they will come here and say text. Notice the IntelliSense pops up. This is based off of the official UI5 documentation. And so based off of that, when you're typing in the editor, based upon the type of element, in this case, it's a button, that's from the SAP.m namespace, then it says, oh, I know the property that you want to use, which is text. So if you just click on that, I'll go ahead and finish that out for you. And so now I can come in here and say, in terms of my text, I can say sort data or something of that nature. All right. Do a quick little save. So file, save all. And if you're a developer 20, if I come down to the bottom, remember, click first, then type. So I check the status. So it says, all right, you have modified master.view .xml. And so now, again, using the command line prompt, this time I'm going to do get and I'm going to do pull. Pull is just the opposite of push, that's all. So it's basically a refresh. So I'm going to pull based on my origin URL. So that's going to be the URL for the repository in GitHub. And of course, I want the master branch, like so. Click on that, and then notice right here, arrow. It says your local changes to the following files will be overwritten by a merge. So what it's detecting is that you made a change to this button, and then developer 21 has also made a change to that button, and they have committed to the repository. So they've checked those changes actually in. So if I went and grabbed that now, it would actually overwrite what you just did. I'm detecting that, so I'm going to give you the opportunity by throwing this error. I'm going to give you the opportunity to deal with this. So now you have a conflict that we have to deal with. And there's a couple of different ways, that can actually, that you could deal with this. But it gives us gives us a suggestion. Please either commit your changes or stash them before you merge, okay? So I'm going to go with the stash approach. So we click up here in the menu to make sure we're in the GitHub view. There we go. All right, so master.view is modified, which we see right here. Notice the ellipses, and then notice there's a stash. Stash means just that, stash loot. Maybe not the best analogy to use, but that's where the term is commonly coming from. So we're going to stash this little change that was just made a few moments ago. Stash message, which I don't really have to put, but I could just say stashing stashing. Let's go ahead and use that term. So stashing new text for button. Enter. And then there we go. And so now if we take a look at the button, you'll notice that the text piece is gone. So now let's go and pull again. So we click, so git pull, origin, make sure we grab the master branch. Okay, so now that's going to bring in the new file that is here. And let's see, I believe in terms of what was changed a little bit earlier, it was URL, maybe something different. So at any rate, I can now apply the stash. So I can click here, and you see apply. I can either, in this case, there's just one, so I can do apply latest stash or apply stash. It won't matter in either case. In this case, since there's only one anyway. But notice, select the stash to apply on master, stashing new text for button. Okay, so now I've synced up, and on top of that, I've applied this stash, and there we go. So now the button is set up there. There's my text, which is set data there. I can now do my save, so file, then do a save all. As typical, do my message, so add it, new text, to button, done by developer 20. And then commit signed off as before. Oops. Let's see, stage all changes. There we go. Done by developer 20. And commit signed off. And there we go. Okay. And to make sure this gets pushed out to the remote repository. So again, git push, origin, master. There we go. Okay. If we take a quick look, you should see less than a minute ago, which is, oops, that's the wrong one though. Let's go to the master branch. That should be less than a minute ago. And there we go. Added new text to button, done by developer 20. All right. So now, finally, again, sort of our exploration of Git here, we're going to go back to developer 21. And one of the most common things that you will certainly see with software is what we call, I don't want to say glitches. That may not be the best term to use, but service packs. That's very common in software development because service packs are used just to add incremental changes. Oops, incremental. And so we're going to see how that would work with Business Application Studio and GitHub. And so that's going to be Developer 21 that's going to do that. So for whatever reason, we've determined that there's some sort of an incremental change that we actually need to do. So the first thing, since we have had subsequent to Developer 21 another commit, Developer 21 is going to come here and say, okay, let me go ahead and pull origin master just in case anything has changed. Let's pull. Yep, and something has changed because notice my button now has that text on it. Okay, good. So we have that first. And then if we come over here, confirm our remote branches. So get branch, remote, and there they go. So main and master. Let's come over to our files here, like so. Let's confirm our status. So your branch is up to date with origin master. So everything is refreshed, no problem there. And we're now going to come here and we're going to say get, then branch. And we're going to actually create a new branch. It's going to be called SP, which is a common name for service packs. That usually sometimes it'll be called service pack, SP. Sometimes SPS will also be used for service pack stack. And then common convention is a 2-digit number. So in this case, 01. This will create this, but locally. So now we need to add it. It's local. We need to add it remotely, basically. So first, let's go ahead and check it out. Okay. Because if I do get status here, we're still on master. But by putting in a checkout, so get checkout, and in the name, SP01, switch to branch SP01. Again, I can confirm with status that, okay, we're on branch SP01. So now we make some changes. Let's say that there was a change up at the top, something with the title. So here on line number 14, I'm going to change that from title to title 2. Again, doesn't so much matter what the change is, just any type of a change there. A quick little save. There we go. And so now, as is typical, let's go ahead and stage our changes and commit them. So back over here to Git. You know the drill now. You've seen this a few times. So we're going to stage all changes. Do a quick little message here. So this is change title. Done by Developer 21. And then, of course, commit with a message. That's all local. So now, which means GitHub itself does not yet have this new branch. So to make sure that we take this entirely new branch and send it out to GitHub, we will now come down here at the bottom and we will type in git. We want to do a push out to the remote repository now, so origin. This is a brand new branch, which we call SP01. Give that a second. There we go. We'll now see that coming out over here. Let's do a quick little refresh. Flight analysis 1. New branch, SP01. And there we go. Okay. Again, not uncommon with a lot of software where we have a need for a temporary branch. Because there may be an emergency repair or something like that that we need to do. And so based off of that, we will create this branch. Again, it's meant to be temporary, which is how we'll use it here. But that being said, temporary notwithstanding, we need that particular branch. Okay. So now let's come back to Developer 20, who is currently unaware of this new branch that's here, but that developer can become aware pretty quickly by doing the fetch command. So git fetch, and then you'll notice what it says there, new branch, SP01. Okay, so then what developer 20 does is refresh with master, because the intention here is to take this change, which is really just a minor change, a little title change up at the top, and just merge it with master. In other words, bring those changes into master. So first, let me refresh with master, make sure everything's okay. Yep, master is up to date. I can double check my status to make sure I'm on the master branch. Looks like we are. And so now we can come over here and just do what's known as a merge. Again, presumably the developer 20 is going to come up here and look at this and basically say that title is, as far as line 14 is concerned, title 2 is just fine. Okay. So that would be git, and then of course that's the merge command. Go to my origin URL, which is my remote repository. There's going to be a branch there called SP01. So right now, on line number 14, it says title. But as soon as I execute this, there we go. Notice it now says title 2. So effectively, I've merged the two together. So now, unless if I had additional changes I wanted to make, I could do so. But in this case, developer 20 is saying, nope, other than that, everything looks good. So I'm just now going to resync this back out. So git push back out. So now the changes in the branch SP01 have been merged into master. So we're going to update master. And now that a branch SP01 has served its purpose, we come here. We're not so much pushing out, although we're using the same command, but what we're really doing is we're saying, okay, SP01 has served its purpose, so delete it. Effectively, we've merged whatever changes in service pack 01 into the main branch. So we use our delete switch SP01, and there we go. And there we go, deleted. Okay. So hopefully this sort of little demo and lecture and so forth that we have been doing for the last hour and 50 minutes or so has just given you a feel for using the tool. Basically, that's all we really wanted to do today was just give you a nice introduction. You can kind of see how the windows work, some of the wizards, how it interacts with other tools that you would actually use on premise systems, tenant connectivity, SSL tunnels, GitHub, and things like that. So that concludes sort of the lecture part and the demo part for this morning.